you have a practice or are you running a business? Valuation is the ultimate KPI.
Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Financial Advisor Podcast, brought to you by Trulytics, the one and only comprehensive advisor transition management platform. This week on the show, I have Scott Danner, the CEO of Freedom Street Partners, with me, and we're going to be talking about how he built a very large wealth management business by acquiring other financial advisory businesses. Now, this is an area of intense interest for many of you who listen or watch this podcast because Trulytics was originally founded as a valuations calculation tool for advisory businesses that were looking to sell or acquire other businesses. And that still remains a big part of this audience, right? Many firms or individual advisors come to Trulytics because the transition that they're interested in is either acquiring or selling their business. And if that's you, this is the episode for you. And now, even if that isn't you right now, you're absolutely going to want to check out this episode because not only is Scott going to share some of his experiences and the things he's walked through to acquire other businesses and how you can prepare to be a buyer in this market, but he also talks about how he and his team had to grow as the business evolved over time, right? And at one point in time, Scott was an individual advisor. And then he had to make the decision to grow, not just organically, but grow through acquisition. And that changes the dynamic of the business, but it also requires growth on behalf of the individual, right? You go from being an individual contributor, somebody who just owns a book of business, only has to deal with your clients, to somebody who suddenly is going to be managing a team of other advisors and taking over the stewardship of their client base and the heirs of that client base, right? So it's heavier responsibilities, requires some different leadership skills and so forth. So Scott and I talk a lot about that and some of the things he's done to kind of work on his own self-improvement. And I think you're going to get a ton out of this. Plus, by the way, as you'll hear in the beginning, or you'll see if you're watching the show, Scott's also a really handsome bald dude. So if you like handsome bald dudes chatting it up about wealth management stuff, this is for you, okay? All right, before we get to the show, please do make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, YouTube. If you like watching video, hit us up there. And as always, please do send in your questions and suggestions for guests and topics for the show. You can hit us up, podcast@trulytics.com, or reach out to us, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. Again, YouTube. Always great to get your comments in there. And you can find me. I'm at Mike Langford basically everywhere. Okay, let's get to our conversation with Scott Danner of Freedom Street Partners. Scott Danner, so awesome to see another incredibly handsome bald dude on my screen this Friday. Welcome to the Modern Financial Advisor Podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's always nice to share the stage with somebody that has no hair just like me. The blessing in disguise of having no hair.
Well, first of all, we're incredibly aerodynamic, right? So nothing is slowing us down in a wind tunnel. So there's that piece of it. And we're just very efficient with our lives. You get out of the shower quick, whoop, and we're ready to rock and roll.
It's perfect. I'm kind of convinced that, as we get older, we're supposed to buy that midlife crisis Porsche convertible. And, now that we have no hair, it just makes sense to drive around in that thing. I don't have one, but if I did, it wouldn't bother me because my hair wouldn't get messed up.
That's right. You don't have to worry about it. I do it all the time. I have the sunroof open, the windows open, and it doesn't bother me at all, right?
Doesn't make a difference.
The only thing I have to worry about, and you may have this as well, I get hat head, like legitimate hat head. When you had hair, you take it off, your hair be all messed up after wearing your baseball hat all day. I have a ring dent in my head for like an hour after I take a baseball hat off. So I would make sure I'm home for a while.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. 100%.
Oh, fantastic. That's awesome. Well, I'm so grateful that you were willing to come on the show here and talk about a variety of topics. And I think we're going to, cover a whole range of stuff today. But what was particularly interesting for the Modern Financial Advisor audience is, we talk a lot about transition on the show, about advisors making different transitions in their career. Some of it's entering their career, some of it's acquiring another business, which you and I are going to spend a lot of time on today. And then some of it's exiting the business, right? Of course. And you have grown Freedom Street Partners to be a very large and very successful wealth management firm. And part of the way you've done it is you've grown through acquisitions. So I thought maybe we could kind of kick things off with, where did you start? Like, when was that point where you're like, you know what, instead of just growing this thing organically, I'm going to start acquiring other advisors' businesses?
Right. Well, I think it's a great question. And I think with Freedom Street, part of the reason that we started this was the average age of an advisor, successful advisor in our industry, is 62 years old. You know, the averages will change depending upon which firms start to hire significantly high amounts of young advisors, and it might drive the numbers down. But the average guy or gal in this industry is 60 years old at a level of success where most of them do not have a plan. So advisors are phenomenal at planning and changing their clients' lives for the better. And they're usually so focused on creating a better life for you that they're not always focused on creating that better life for them. And this seemed to be a theme at my previous firm. It seemed to be a theme I was seeing throughout the industry. And so one of the things was just the sheer opportunity that I think is presenting itself in the next decade to 2 decades for business. And that was something that drew me to that as a calling, if you will. The other thing that I kept thinking about is one of my favorite things about this industry was the training and coaching and consulting I had done for other advisors. And I just thought, look, we believe in some pretty important things that I think could help advisors and clients have better connectivity and longevity of relationships and businesses to be stronger. What if we did this not only one at a time, one client at a time, but one advisory team at a time? And that is an exponential growth mentality. And that was something that I thought would be really valuable. And so whether it's transitioning advisors through affiliating with our company and really tapping into the resources that we provide, whether it's creating a succession plan so that they're not being acquired, but they're at least prepared for that next chapter. They know what multiples they're looking at. They understand what that next chapter looks like, or it's an actual acquisition, which is a little quicker and usually with a definitive term and time and amount. You know, I felt like those were areas that we could really focus on. And so that kind of led me to this part of the business and interested me. And a lot of it really goes down to just thinking a little bigger. Every year, I feel like I have to expand the way that I think and learn and, you know, grow. And that's the expectation. Just think a little bigger.
You know, you've teed up something that we're going to talk about in a little while. That kind of you mentioned that the abundance mindset and talking about wanting to grow a lot. And I really love it. You and I had this incredibly vibrant conversation last week about some of those topics, and I'm really excited about that. I want to go back to something you said at the beginning, though. You mentioned that it's surprising how many advisors really have no plan for themselves, right? To like, what are they going to do when Father Time, as I frequently say on this podcast, you know, Father Time's undefeated, right? Eventually, he will come looking for you and tell you it's time to leave the business, right? Why do you think it is? Because we've heard the same thing. We've done analysis. That Truelytics has done a lot of analysis on the advisor population, and it's something ridiculous. Like over 70% of advisors have no succession plan. Like they basically, it's to some extent, it's like they're just planning on working forever, I guess. So why do you think that is? Why do you think that so many advisors are rolling around, even though they're very successful? Some of these people make several $100,000 a year, or some of them 7 figures, and yet no plan.
Yeah. Well, I think it's relatively normal. You know, being an advisor is a unique profession in that you are not only in a career that you show up every day and work, but you're also in a business that you run and own. Whether you're on the wirehouse side and you're an employee, you still look at it from an ownership perspective at all times. And if you're on the independent channel, you do own your practice. And so you're in this mentality constantly where it's always bigger than just a job. And I think that that's one of the reasons people get caught up in just the impact of the career, They get caught up in the community. They get caught up in all the things that are, peripheral with the career. They're also helping everybody else. And so they think it's going to be easy. I think some advisors kind of have an idea when we talk to a lot, I think the number FP Transitions had some math that I saw recently, as recent as 2019, 2020, that over 80 people are interested in a practice when someone's selling, and 50 something will bid on it. And then there's a very, very small percentage that can actually take it on.
Yeah.
And the reality is, I think that we look at that part of our career as helping people as something that's so easy for us once we've been doing it for multiple decades, that maybe we diminish the importance of doing it for ourselves. The other thing we hear all the time, Mike, is this: nobody can do it like I can do it. Advisors have built a level of confidence that may only be rivaled by professional athletes and some of the other very, very successful humans out there who really believe in their ability. But I mean, I've rarely met an advisor who doesn't think that their way is the very best way to do something. And I love that about advisors. I think it's really cool, but that also creates a little bit of a blind spot in our lives, in that occasionally it opens us up for thinking that we have it all figured out. And and so I don't know the exact answer. I just know that it happens too often. And I know that the last reason is that advisors, more often than probably most business owners, have it in our brains that maybe one day one of our children will want to take over this business. And that's probably one of the number one things I hear when I'm talking to advisors 60 to 70 years old. They're like, oh, well, my son, he just got his finance degree and he's interested in the career. And you start talking to them, and they built this thing from the bottom, from the ground up. And their son is going to come in, and over the next 3 to 4 years, their mindset is, we're going to hand this off in some capacity. And it's just very rarely doable. It's very rarely a doable thing. So really just evaluating, going through the same processes that we go through with our clients is pretty healthy for advisors to do for ourselves. Go through that same trajectory of the financial planning and identifying our next chapter vision and what are the things we see ourselves doing. And when you do that, you start to realize you got to have a plan. And most importantly, catastrophic risk, right? I mean, what happens if we get hit by that bus tomorrow? What's the plan? And without a plan at all, that can be a pretty dangerous thing. So, these are the things we have conversations with advisors on every day.
Yeah, and that makes sense. So we've talked about that a little bit on this show too. And in fact, Truelytics has got the solution called True Continuity for that very reason. What happens if you get hit by the bus, or as one of the founders, Terry Mullen, said, what if you get hit by the Uber? Now it's going to, instead of it's a bus, it's like, get hit by the Uber. Who takes over your clients? Who makes sure the business continues, right? And no, so it's a really, really good point. And I hadn't thought about the hope for having it be a family business, somebody to take over, but it makes sense. I mean, this is a recurring revenue business. There's a lot of relationships at play. Chances are some of your best clients may know your children, because they've seen your kids at whether you've hosted events or whatever, or if you're managing family money or your friends' assets. So yeah, I can totally see that. I hadn't really thought about that. That's fascinating. Let's continue down the road of acquisitions, kind of like the next phase, right? How do you begin to identify advisory businesses that you want to acquire? Because as you mentioned, you said, something like 80 kind of, start looking at it, 50 might make an offer, right? So it is a funnel, right? And I guess that's true for like real estate purchases and other business things. But what's a filter for you at a high level as you start to go, okay, because you've done this many, many times now. What's your filter look like? Okay, I want to buy another business. We want to grow this year. What are we looking for? How do you do it? How do you go start?
Yeah. I think it's an assortment of things. How in marketing, they'll say you got to do the old way of teaching marketing was print, radio, television, and you weren't sure which one was working because it's a three-legged stool, and you would do it all. And you hope that it leads you to the right direction. Right. I think we do a little bit of everything. the first thing that I think is most important is really learning from the people that do it best and that have been doing it for a while. So for us, it was about networking and connecting, building relationships with the growth engines that fund a lot of this stuff. So whether it be, our friends at Skyview Partners, who have been great friends and great partners of ours, Live Oak Bank, some of the funding agents, and just connecting with them to see what's working, what's not, what are the multiples that are most likely to have success, and building relationships in those markets, building relationships at your own firm. There's been a couple of things we've done right here within our broker dealer at Raymond James, and you'd be surprised how many people exist that fall into that market right in your own backyard where you're sitting. And whether that's your backyard in your zip code or it's your backyard with your broker dealer, I think there are ways to really help people identify this as an opportunity within their own platform. And then we have some great recruiter relationships where we kind of tell people exactly what we're looking for, and they go out and they siphon them out for us and bring them in. And last but not least, we know a lot of people in the industry. You've been doing it a couple of decades. I have a lot of conversations with friends in the business that aren't ready, but I think preparing to be ready is even more important than being ready. And I talk about this a lot. It's the mental game, the preamble, if you will, to the acquisition, or feeling that I could even be ready for that next step. And that is, we've mentioned, I have a book coming out very shortly called Freedom Street: How I Learned to Create a Rich Life, Live My Legacy, and Own the Future as a Financial Advisor. And here's the point behind that. The preamble of any transition, whether it's just an advisor going from a wirehouse to an independent, and creating that big transition, or changing firms between houses, or they're actually exiting the business, I've got to identify those factors. I've got to understand, what is a rich life, and am I living it? Am I going to be living more of it when I stop doing what I'm doing? Because sometimes it goes back to that first question you asked. Why do advisors, delay? Well, it's really hard to give up on that recurring revenue. The reality is, when you look at getting 2 to 3 years once and then never again, right, I don't care how good that number looks, it still isn't in perpetuity. And so it's hard to not be that guy that shows up every day into my 80s and say, hey, what am I waiting for? It's right. Just, you don't control that destiny at that point in time. And so I'll pause there, because I think there's a lot of meat in that for you to ask another question.
First of all, I love the fact you brought the book up, and I feel like a complete jerk, because one of the reasons why I said, hey, let's get you on the show. You've been working on your book, and I forgot to put it in the darn notes. So I'm so glad you brought it up, because I was a little chagrin on my side for forgetting to mention it. So thank you for teeing that up, where I am going to want to spend some time on the book there. Yeah, it's 100% true that, people, again, that recurring revenue, you're not 100% willing to let go of it all the way, right? Because like, as you said, in 3 years, it's like, I could have made that same money 3 years from now. I could have just stayed on for another 3 years. But the other point that you made is, part of your life journey is looking at that, what's that next chapter, right? It's like, what do you want to do? It's like, yeah, at a certain point in time, you don't want to have to get up at 7 o'clock every morning and get to the office, or even if it's your home office, right? And then spend all your time doing this stuff. Maybe you want to do some other things. Maybe you want to, spend a few months traveling around the world, or maybe there's another second career. Like, even if you're in your 60s, it can be another career that might have some interest to you, right? So that's really, really interesting. What do you look at, kind of closing out this topic on acquiring a business? You mentioned it, kind of stole my thunder on this, the whole preparing to be prepared.
I did.
I love it. No, it's good.
I jumped.
I felt so smart when I put that in the notes, but that's okay. No, I love it. It is, because it's such a smart concept to talk about, right? That a lot of advisors are thinking, I would like to acquire another business, right? Like, as you said, 80 for everyone that's looking to sell maybe is like, yeah, sure, I'd buy your business. But it's not as easy as saying, so you mentioned Skyview, like getting your financing ducks in a row, like being kind of finance worthy, right? Because by the way, the days of advisors taking back a note and just letting you do seller financing, those are kind of over now. The financing is just, it's the way it is. You're going to have to get a loan to buy this business, most likely.
Mike, I've had 3 calls in the last 2 weeks from advisors who have called me and said, hey, Scott, do you mind if we pick your brain? And honestly, anytime I get a chance to talk to other advisors, the first thing I've learned is anyone picking my brain is allowing me to pick theirs. And I'm growing and learning from them. So if I can pull aside 15 to 20 minutes and just hear anybody out, I really try to take the time to do that. And 3 of those calls in the last couple of weeks were literally people that want to acquire and start. But the starting point is, I just feel like if I add more people and I add more practices that, I'll be able to really see a big revenue jump. And I want to start with purchasing somebody. And I have a couple guys and every one of them said, I think I could just bring them on and over 4 years pay them off. And I said, well, if they go out in the open market and they evaluate what their practice is worth at any level, they're going to look at you and think you're trying to scam them. I mean, so let me get this straight. What we want is we want to take zero risk on our end. We want to buy your practice, Mike. We want to have no risk, all the reward, all the clients move over, and then you just leave after 4 years and I'm going to use your own revenue to pay you off. That's the old mentality, right?
Yeah.
That stinks. That's a bad deal. Yeah. So, finding it, and that's what I told him. I said, look, if that same guy calls me and he says, hey, I want to just run a comparison and I want to see how you would take over and acquire our practice, I'm going to talk to him about setting up a deal that's most efficient and effective for them. What's the timeline they're looking for? Are they looking for 1 to 2 years? Are they looking for 3 to 5? Are we looking for a 9-year downshift and succession option? What are we looking to do? Number one. Then number two, I'd want to evaluate how they want to be paid out. Is it an issue with their family where they have to get out quick? What's most important to them? But to your point, I've been taking a lot of calls like that recently, literally in the last 2 weeks. And I love helping to guide the conversation, but it is a great thought. Everybody wants to acquire. And the other thing they always get is this. The best advisor teams are sometimes, 2-people teams. They've run a very efficient and effective office. They're doing $1 million to $2 million a year in production. They're crushing it. And they're like, all we have to do is replicate this. Well, when they go and they meet with that other advisor wants to know how you do business. And you and Judy being the best team ever isn't an answer that I'm going to trust you with if I'm going to provide you with my entire practice. I want to know, what are your processes and systems? How do you manage money? How in alignment is that investment management process to what I do? How compliant is the practice and what levels of compliance are you practicing at? Do you focus on life, not only wealth? Is it all business or is it life and wealth planning? Like, these are some of the things that we find in these conversations. And I love having them because I'm learning more and more every day. And I don't have it all figured out by any means. I'm still learning and growing in this career. But it's definitely something that if you go into this market, you got to be prepared to compete with people who are going to be able to pay for everything up front and not something that's going to be so risk adverse.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm glad you brought up so many of those points about kind of presenting yourself as the ideal acquisition partner, right? Because I think being an acquirer, being a buyer in this market is very similar to being a client or a prospective client who's out there looking for the right financial advisor, right? To some extent, and I know there's lots of details in this. This is not a one-to-one analogy here, but listen, this seller has lots of choices. And at a high level, from a technical perspective, most of the choices look very similar. There might be several advisors at the same broker-dealer. There might be several advisors who have very similar business models. There's got to be a reason why they choose you over the other suitors, right? And some of that's going to be the way you present yourself, right? The way you say, this is why I'm the perfect fit, or me and my team are the perfect fit to take over your business, and you can entrust your clients with us. And I love the fact that you're talking about that. Package yourself just the right way. Be prepared to be prepared. That's great.
Yeah. I mean, you just said something so important, though. You said it's almost like how a financial advisor looks at the client, and it's the same kind of relationship. Well, I look at it the same way. My job as a financial advisor is to help my clients feel heard, connected to their dreams and goals, show them a path to get there, right? Well, the same thing's with the advisor who's looking to retire. I've got to really understand, what are they trying to accomplish? What specifically is their main objective? And is the main objective that they're saying the same objective that they mean? Meaning that I can't tell you how many people say, it's not about the money to me, Scott. It's really about these important things. And it's really all about the money. And if it's all about the money, it's not usually the most successful transition. Yeah. The most successful transitions come, just like your clients, when you're working for something bigger than just the management of the assets. You're really helping to change their lives, their families' lives. You're solving problems for them, and you're creating a legacy in some capacity that goes well beyond the business. One of our advisors that we acquired just met with one of my partners just last week, and they were setting up a golf event. And he said, I was looking back on the deal, and I don't know that I realized how great of a deal it was for me when I went through this. But going out a year or two now, I'm so thankful and grateful that it went the way it did. And you guys really were great. This is what he said. And everybody's difficult to some extent when you're transitioning out of your practice. So, we all have ways that we want to have things done, and we know exactly what we want out of the deal. And so he also then went on to say, I'd actually like to be an advocate for you guys in this market, and I want to help you find other advisors just like me. How can I do that? How can you leverage and utilize me? Because all I keep hearing is how happy my clients are with the new systems and the new processes and the way you guys do business. And that only makes me want to shout it from the rooftops how awesome the team is. And I can tell you that when you're going through it, you don't ever feel like that. It's like having teenagers. They love you. They respect you. That one day they're going to really admire all the things you did for them. But in the moment, the teenager is not super appreciative of all the things you're forcing down their throat at that moment. So it's great to hear, and it's great feedback, but those are things that are really good to listen to and hear today.
Yeah. And it's funny, the comp that you mentioned with the teenagers there. Some of it is because, you think of a teenager, they're going through the things that you've gone through many, many times. They're going through it the first time. Right. So there's
transition.
Yeah. They're doing through transition, and they're like, I got this, Dad, type of thing. And you're realizing like, no, you don't got this, because I've actually gone through this like 5 times. I was jokingly say to my son all the time, like, hey dude, I was a 16-year-old boy once, like, just so you know, I actually was 16 once. And let me tell you, like, I seen something very similar to what you're dealing with right now. If you trust me, this is the way I would go through it. But the same is true for like, if you've acquired several businesses and you're talking to an advisor who's selling his or her business for the first time, right? There's some guidance you can offer, some wisdom that came through experience that can be offered. And we try to share that a lot on this show too. Like, we've talked to lots of advisors who have, bought and sold businesses, and trust us, here's some things you're going to want to think about. Let's shift to gears to like the book stuff. I like this. Let's get into that stuff, because that was, you may remember last week, my eyes kind of lit up when we started talking about this set of topics here. You are, just in my vantage point, you're somewhat unique from all the advisors that I've met. You're spending a lot of time on personal growth, on business growth, on being open and sharing of the things you learn. Not every advisor is like that. So first of all, where did that mindset come from? Like, where did you, I kind of like, I'm a big fan of origin stories. Like, what was it that you found that like, I need to I need to start focusing on my growth. And if I'm going to grow this business, I need to be a better leader. I need to be able to communicate better, right? I need to be able to, all these other things. Well, where did that come from?
I would like to say that I came up with it on my own, right? And I really just figured all this out. But I think it really goes back to the way I was brought up, and my parents were very blue collar, hardworking individuals, and they sacrificed a ton for my family to go to Catholic school and have a better education, even if it was on financial aid. And they just had a significant influence in my life, developing that education mindset. Well, you don't always appreciate it when you're growing up. And there are a couple moments I think back on where I made some major decisions to grow and learn. And I didn't know a whole lot about business growing up, and I had to figure a lot of this out myself. And so the way that I look at it is if I can do a podcast, or I can write a book, or I can, do one video that helps one person figure it out a little bit better and be more successful and be the change agent in their own family, that provides a totally different perspective and a different lifestyle and all the things that this career has provided me, my family, my children, my parents. I'm so grateful for that, the end result is so easy for me to see how wonderful it is that it makes it easy to want to share. The other thing is I've never read anything, and I read a ton, from Think and Grow Rich to John Maxwell's leadership books to the Bible, to anything that you read on great leadership. None of it talks about keeping it all to yourself. None of it talks about this scarcity mindset that you brought up in the beginning that we talked about. Everything is built on abundance. And the reality is I have a lot of good ideas. And if I'm great at what I do, I'm not scared of sharing them with the world, because I'm the differentiator, just like all the other advisors listening to this today are. They're the differentiator. Whether someone else tries to execute and implement their own ideas, you are the difference maker. And so I think that's really where it comes from. I also, very simply, giving is one of the most selfish things you can ever do because it feels so damn good. There's nothing that feels better than truthfully giving back to whatever it is that you feel empowered to give to. And I've always gained way more from those relationships than I have from the ones that I just went in thinking about the business or thinking about what we're going to get out of it. And so, I don't know if that specifically answers your question, but my parents' growth mindset, and maybe some of the fixed mindset I grew up with, thinking that I could be a cop or a teacher, and then really expanding that when I got to school and seeing something new, then reading and reading and reading. I did $500,000 of production, Mike, the first time. I don't remember, a couple years into the business. And I felt like I had hit, I was like, wow, I can't believe I was able to do that. I was so shocked. But instead of really being settled, I hired Steve Moeller, who was a business coach and consultant, author of Effortless Marketing for Financial Advisors, a book I had read like 3 times. And I just called Steve on the phone. I found his phone number. I called him. I was like, hey, I don't know if my firm is going to help me go to the next level, but I think you can. I really buy into your concepts of this California style life first. And I've always done that. And I felt out of place in a lot of the places I've been. Help me figure out a better way. And here's what I want to do. And that also, trajectory wise in the business, had me think completely different. When I can't solve something, I look to a mentor or somebody outside to help me grow in a way that's exponential.
I love that. So we had the founders of Vise on, which is an artificial intelligence powered investment solution. And these guys are young. I mean, like early 20s, and they've raised like, $50 million from Sequoia, like just, top tier companies. And they're operating in the old guys pool, right? I mean, this is an old dude's business. And here these young dudes like just crushing it. So one of the questions I asked them was like, hey, what is it? Like, how are you doing this? Like, well, you're kind of polished. You seem to like kind of be ahead of your time. And they echoed basically what you just said. Samir, the CEO, he said, one of our mentors said, this question's been answered. Every question you have has been answered by somebody already, right? So just go find out who's the top 5 experts in the area that you're interested in or that you're struggling with, and reach out and ask them. And it's exactly what you said. And I think the advisor population could do more of that, exactly what you're just describing, because I think many of these advisors get into business kind of in the sales mentality, right? They are stockbrokers, the OG ones, the 60-year-olds you're talking about, got into the business as stockbrokers. They've grown their business, but they haven't really thought of it as a business. They thought of it as a practice that they own, right? And I really like the stuff that you're working on. How did that translate into you deciding, I want to write a book?
I think it was an easy transition. Number one, I want to share. I really believe in this this mentality that sharing what we learn along the way helps other people develop in a different capacity. I've read so many things in my life where one chapter in a book was powerful. I'm not the kind of person that reads a book, by the way, and then like lives every aspect of that book. I can't follow a diet 100%. I'm unable to follow complete directions from somebody else, period. I have to fail at something myself and learn from it. But it doesn't mean I can't take something from each thing that I've read and really execute on little things across the path that I'm walking on. And I just felt like all I can share is my story. You know, when I first started writing the book, Mike, it was really about a how-to. And then I got through the first edit and I was like, you know what? This is less of a how-to, and it's become more of how I learned. I actually changed the title from How to Create a Rich Life, Live a Legacy and Own the Future, to How I Learned. Because, you know, it's really just parts and stories of my journey. But I'm humbly coming to every advisor saying, I don't have it figured out. I'm still learning as I go. Learned to this point is all I'm saying. And by the time the book will come out, I will have learned 3 to 4 more times the amount I did prior. And I hope to continue to do that. And I hope all of us continue to do that. And the other thing I really value is I don't hate a lot of things. I hate how our industry is so siloed. Like, this firm is this way and they're the only ones that know this, and that firm is this way, and nobody shares ideas. Like, it's not that different, guys. It's just not. You know what the biggest difference is that for the most part, we all look and are approximately the same. You know, 80% male, very, very small number of female representation, very limited minorities. Diversity is not huge in our industry yet. It's changing, but it's not happening yet as fast as we probably would like to see. But I bring that up because ideas are something that if all of us were sharing more of them, we'd be helping more people, truly helping more people, truly a fiduciary duty of helping more people to the best of our ability. And so I've always been the guy that pulls in different financial advisors from different companies and say, hey, what's working for you guys? And, you know, if they're the kind of person that wants to share what's going on and not just the kind of person that wants to tell me how great they are, then I'm all ears. If it's more of a, let me tell you how great I am, that's not what I want to listen to. Because I'm not doing that in this book, and I don't ever want it to be that way. Yeah. I want it to be something where these are the things I've learned from. This is creating a rich life, living a legacy, and owning the future. All these things prepare you for being ready, prepared to be prepared. You know, you have to be ready to turn over your business to somebody at some point in time, whether it's today or in the future. And the more ready you are, the more valuable it becomes. I talked to a young roofing company today. A buddy of mine who's an estate planning attorney said, hey, I've got a roofing company in our area that's crushing it, and I really want you to just come in and consult. And so at lunch, right before this appointment, I met with this guy, and they've become one of the top roofing companies in the state of Virginia, and they're crushing it, right? Yeah. And the reality is, in one part of the conversation, he said, I'm really struggling because it's my baby. And I stopped him and I said, look, buddy, here's one bit of advice I can give you. And I've failed at this too, and all of us will at some point in time. Your business is not your baby. Your business is a business. I said, do you have any kids? He goes, I have 3. I said, they're your babies. If you smother and mother them too much, what ends up happening? they're enabled, and they're the very people that you can't stand that are sucking the life out of your clients every day that you see your clients paying for in perpetuity in their lifetimes, right? Because you have to get them prepared to sail on their own. That's the job of a great parent. So if it starts out as a baby, that's fine. It probably should. But at some point in time, we make a change in our brain where we realize this baby is our business. And if I run it like a business, I'll enhance the value of the business. And then it will be easier to let go when it's time to seek maximum opportunity and maximum value for it in the future.
Yeah, that's such an insightful concept of, getting ready or being able to let go, allowing you to grow, right? Because in order for that to be set up that way, that means you're delegating, as an example. You're delegating to other people. You're putting trust in some other people to manage certain aspects of the business. And so as a result, you're going to lean on some other strengths of other people. They're going to grow. They're going to get stronger. You're going to be able to focus more on your strengths because chances are you're probably delegating the things that you hate doing. Like for me, I don't like editing podcasts and videos. I'd rather have somebody do that. And so I'm training people to do that. And that's awesome. That's fantastic.
Isn't that the best part of being in business though? I mean, when I worked as an individual financial advisor, and I call it being a lifestyle financial advisor, I had a great life. I had a great lifestyle. I loved what I did. There's nothing I would ever change. But when I transitioned to building a company, I got to do all the things I love doing every day more and more. And I get to have a team around me that are into some of the finer details of the roles I find less interesting.
Yeah.
Or maybe the things I'm not as great at. And I feel like that's another way that we add value to our end client, right? That's really what we're in this business for. And I will add more value to my end client by surrounding myself with people that fill my blind spots. So, that's to your point, that is Freedom Street. I have a Jack Johnson album sitting across from me that you can't see in this frame, but track number 1 is Better Together. Yeah. And the mentality is, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. 1 + 1 can equal exponential numbers if that other one is filling in some of the areas that you're not so great at, but really strong in those areas, and you're building something bigger than yourself. So that's really our mentality.
It's funny. You just talked about inadvertently. I don't think you did it on purpose, but you kind of that 1 + 1 is more. It's kind of like in computer science world is something called Metcalfe's law, which talks about every node that you add to the network makes the network exponentially more valuable, right? That it's not just, hey, I added one other computer onto the network. You think, I can't remember his first name, but Metcalfe, he invented Ethernet basically. And he was talking about like, hey, if we add one more computer to this isn't just like, oh, it's just one more point. It's like, oh, now these 2 computers have 3 different things it can do, right? And then yet another one is like, suddenly it's just exponentially big. You've invested a lot of time and energy building an incredibly valuable network. And you and I talked about some of the fun parts of it, about how you get together with these guys and you're drinking bourbon and exploring things and just having these fun conversations. And you're talking about producing a show in that area. And I think that's amazing. But one of the things that's really interesting about the network, as you described it to me, is it's really filled with what outsiders would call heavy hitters. And I kind of mean that semi tongue in cheek, because I think one of them is a retired baseball player, MLB player. So how did you go about kind of leveling up your network game, going about meeting some of these people? Because a lot of folks, there's a whole, like, you are the average of your 5 closest friends phenomenon. Yeah. How did you go about kind of assembling those? Was it just happenstance, or did you actively go looking for, like, I need to be amongst higher level performers?
Yeah. So I think that's a great question. I think number 1 is, I just did a video this morning called "You Are the Energy That You Put Out into the World," right? Like, we are the energy. If I could teach my kids just a couple of lessons, that's going to be one of them all the time. We are the energy we put out. So if we're givers and we're helping people, the reality is, starting a wine festival 12 years ago, and creating a community giver of millions of dollars in our local community allows me to be surrounded by people that have done amazing things. And I'm not talking about financial health, financial coaching. I'm not doing any consulting. I'm talking about wine, something we all like. And so there's a unifier in that. And the energy that I'm putting out is I'm willing to give and create some opportunity for everyone else that's interested in giving to our charities that end up making money from this 8,000 person wine festival we started, right? The other thing is in the book, I actually have a chapter called Leveling Up. And I've read multiple things about, so you just did an amazing end road. You didn't even know you were bringing us into this, but see, you did a perfect job today. But leveling up in like the NBA, if you have any friends that you know that have successful friends or anybody you know that's been extremely successful in their craft, let's use the NBA or the NFL. Sure. It's very simple. The minute that they make it, everyone around them thinks they made it. And that's a very dangerous thing. It could be very dangerous because where you were is not where you're heading. And in order to get to that next level, in order for that NBA player to be great, he's got to surround himself with NBA greats. He's got to surround himself with a work ethic that's bar none. He can't go out partying all the time and hanging with the crew and doing all these things. There has to be some leveling up and some changes, some mental changing that goes on. And I think I don't believe in seeking it out. I mean, there are people that can seek it out. I just don't force relationships. I don't force Mother Nature. My opinion is I put good energy into the world. I help anybody that needs help. And eventually I keep ending up in circles with great people, great leaders who are trying to do the same thing for me, whether it's a friend who's played professional sports or a Navy SEAL or guys in the business that are 10 times more profitable and more experienced than I am. I know that if they call me, they'll get the answer, and I can help them any way I can. And they know that if I call them, they'll pick up my phone. Yeah. And if anybody still picks up the phone anymore, I mean, I think I'd text them first and be like, "Hey, I'm going to call you."
I kind of like it. Every once in a while, I get a phone call. I'm like, "This is so old school. It's so nice." Although I've really lost the ability to actually keep the phone up to my head. If somebody calls me and it's going to be like, if this isn't really quick, you got to hold on while I take my AirPods out of my pocket and put them in, because I just can't handle it. Like with the phone up to my head anymore. It just doesn't work.
I can't either. I can't. Maybe it's the brain cancer we know we're getting from it. I don't know, but
yeah, it's so funny. You just think about like, my kids think I'm nuts when I start to tell them like what it was like back in the day. Like, yeah, you'd have a phone, like you'd hold it and you was tethered to the wall. Like and there was, by the way, there was only one phone line in the house. They're like, what? Yeah.
And if you had call waiting, you were rich.
Yep.
And you know, my mom would end up spun in a circle with this long line while she cooked breakfast and talked to her mom on the phone and her sisters and talked to us. And, you know, it was a part of the day.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. They just sit there and shoot the breeze on the phone. It was just so funny. I talked about the pandemic thing and like, I can't imagine what would have happened back in the 80s when I was growing up if this happened. Because, again, one phone line. We didn't have the internet. My kids are at least able to chat with their friends all the time, in FaceTime or whatever. My son plays online video games, as sounds like yours does as well. We were talking at the beginning of this call. So they're constantly interacting, even though they're not actually seeing their friends in person. So thank God for the internet. You teed up a video. You mentioned you did a video this morning. And I'm glad you did, because that's one of my topics. Your video game is very strong, sir, on LinkedIn and elsewhere. What brought that on? You know, when did you decide, like, you know what, I'm going to start firing up the videos and sharing stuff? And, you know, if you could, like, even if it's anecdotal, like, share some of the benefits of it. I mean, whether it's successes, like it's led to new business, or if it's helping clients or helping other advisors on your team. Let's talk about your video game. How's it going?
So let's start. It's a great question. And the why behind it first is I truly believe that, you know, there's a significant difference between sales and marketing when you're in business. Sales is telling everybody how great you are. Marketing is attracting people to you. So one guy goes into the bar and tells everyone in the bar that he's an awesome guy and everyone should talk to him. And the other guy goes into the bar and stands in the corner and just everybody comes up to him and wants to talk to him, right? Two totally different mentalities. But you have to do the right things to attract people to you. And so in my opinion, today, there is this vacuum of so much stuff coming at you in social media. There's so many things that's just sucking you in for long periods of time. And people they're not taking breaks. Their breaks are their phone. Their breaks are these quick videos. Their breaks are, actually watching and learning something. We almost have information overload going back to your 1980s. We would have never been in a pandemic in the 80s because nobody would have ever gotten it from one phone to the next. It would have been busy.
Yeah.
Like nobody would have, and the kids would have been too busy outside playing to have worried about it. Like these things change. But with video for me, I felt like we could create content that would help people. And so I create videos every day, whether one person watches, 100 people watch, or 10,000. And I try to create content that will help people either in business, in family scenarios and dynamics. I try to focus on the four quadrants that I also mention in the book. And my four quadrants are really, life and relationships is quadrant 1 up top. On the right is your wealth and work. Underneath, and the foundation of everything, is your health and your spirituality. Without those two things, I struggle to figure out how the other stuff actually makes it. And so I try to build video content in and around all those topics. So the why behind that was, A, I know that it's needed. B, I know good, positive information is needed. And C, I've done some video and I've done some of this stuff. My uncle owned a video production company growing up. When he opened his business, it was one room, a desk, and a phone. And I would ride my bike up there and hide under his desk until he realized I was there. But I was watching and listening, and I was in videos. And it was something I felt pretty comfortable with, quite honestly. So I started. The second part of your question was a great question. Another video I did this morning, which was, what is it doing for business? Well, I had a client come in, multi-million-dollar client this week, new prospective client, actually. The first thing they said to me when we sat down across from each other, they said, Scott, I feel like I already know you. I've watched so many of your videos that I feel like I already know you. What is the trust continuum? Know, like, trust. What does the trust continuum do? How fast did we just speed that up when someone has actually looked into your world a little bit more, into who you are, what you stand for, and what your life is like, not just your business.
Right.
So I got to really learn more about them in that appointment than I ever would have any other meeting. I probably got 2 meetings worth in one, and they were already going to work with us when they walked in because they had made that decision ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I love that you hit that, the whole know you, like you, trust you component of what you're doing here. It's because it's one thing for somebody to see your brochure or come to your website, right? But to hear you, to see you, again, we talked about this, earlier when we talked about acquiring another advisor's business. But when you're thinking about getting a client, the client can choose for any number of advisors who offer the same stuff. But liking you, feeling like they already know you, feeling comfortable with you, is half the battle. That's probably, by the way, why they're going to choose you. Like, of course, they won't choose you if they feel like you're incompetent, right? If you don't offer the things that they need you to have. But if they feel
given. Like, isn't that given, Mike? Like, you should already know what you're doing. You should know what you're doing. That's why they come to you in the first place. That's given. But what is the other intangibles you're bringing to the table? I had a guy one time, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this was really cool. I had a client, an old client that had been with me and moved away, didn't have a ton of money. We worked together and we were brand new in the business. He was brand new starting his business. He called me and he was in one of the markets we have an office. And he said, hey, I want to work with one of these advisors down here. I know you built a great brand. I know you, I want to work with someone local, and I know you'll lead me in the right direction. Which one of your advisors should I work with? And I said, well, do you know this person? You know this person? And one of the advisors, he had pulled up all of them on our website, and he said, one of the advisors on the personal side never once mentioned their family or what they love to do outside of work. And he said, I can't work with someone who doesn't put their family first. And who doesn't, like, this was something he was researching ahead of time and evaluating. Everybody kind of believes, we talked about this the other day in the prep, and I think it's so crucial. There's a mentality that advisors have to be something. So they almost go into character sometimes when they go into an appointment, right? It's like they give someone across from them what they think they want to see and hear. They act like they think someone wants to see and hear. What people want? They want authenticity. Yeah. They want you to be who you are. If you love dogs, they want to see your dog. And if they see your dog and they don't like dogs, they don't work with you, they were a bad fit anyway. Like, that's the reality. Like, we want to work with more and more people that are like us and that we know, like, and trust, not just know, like, and trust us. And that is a key differentiator and something that I feel is a pinnacle point for an advisor in their career when they go from realizing that they're trying to be a character to actually the authentic version of themselves, which to me is freedom. That's true freedom.
I could not agree more. And I love the fact that you brought that they're looking to connect with somebody, right, who kind of shares not only their values, their interests, right, the things that light them up, because you can speak their language, right? We always talk about niche marketing being so important for advisors. And that doesn't mean you have to be like, I'm only looking for people in this industry, right? Sometimes it can be like, as an example, you mentioned a wine festival that you host and put on, that you organize. Well, you're probably going to perform really well with people who are also liking wine, right? Like, hey,
people that like wine, they're cool people. Like wine and bourbon people that sip on stuff like that. They love life. They're looking for experiences. They like to talk. They like to get excited about life's experiences. They tend to want to trust you to do your job so that they can go live their life. They make great clients. I mean, just think about that's common sense.
We should have had some wine for this
podcast. We can do that next time. We'll do that next time.
Next show, we'll fire up some bourbon or some wine, and we'll get a few into it, and then we'll have a really good, funny conversation. You imagine us lit together? That would be hilarious.
It would be funny, but knowing you from the last prep call we had, what I would do is we'd both have to send a wine that has some level of significance to ourselves, to each other. Good idea. So now we're telling the story of the wine and we're tasting it. And I guarantee it will always taste better. And it goes back to that advisor sitting across from the desk. Your story, your brand feels and is better to the end client when you are somebody that's actually delivering a story behind it. It's the person that's working with it. And I think it goes back to the acquisition conversation we had in the very beginning, right? It's no different whether you're working with clients or other advisors. Our objective is to help them all know the real us. And if the real us can help them in their transition or in their next chapter, that's what we're trying to do. That's all we're trying to accomplish.
I love it. I love it. So when does the book come out?
We're set to release in late August, early September. Okay. I have a copy right here in front of me with literally 2 things that have to be completed today to go to final edit, which they do on their own. So it's pretty much complete. Anyone that's ever thought about doing it, I really encourage you. It's therapeutic. The first version of this thing is nothing near the third version. Yeah. And with COVID and everything that happened, I really got delayed. My intention was to have this out in March of 2020. And it got derailed with the way we had life happen last year. And I found it very difficult just honestly to focus on that project. Instead, I really focused on the opportunity of our business, and we ended up really, really growing the business in that time and developing our team and building relationships. And, I paused a little bit on that. So I would have had it released probably really, really early this year, but instead we started doing a little bit more team building and some different things that COVID forced. And I think that truthfully, that allowed us to build the better infrastructure. So as we add more advisors, we're prepared.
That is fantastic. So I assume some advisors who are listening are going to want to follow up with you. They're going to like, hey, I want to learn more about not only about the book, but might want to pick your brain. First of all, is there going to be like a link on your website or a newsletter they can subscribe to get notified about when the book comes out?
Yeah. So what we're doing right now is we're actually building that out. Literally, it should be out within the next 2 weeks. And so check back on freedomstreetpartners.com.
Okay.
I'm also simultaneously launching scottdanner.com.
Oh, cool.
So we're I think a week or two away from releasing that, and that will have. Yeah, I mean it's pretty much done, but my executive admin is begging me to finish like 2 small things that I have to get done, and I don't have anything else to do, Mike. So I'm just trying to find the time. But we're literally we're launch eligible. We're just trying to tweak a couple of things before we open that up, and that's going to be a good place. That's going to be probably the best place to be checking, because I'm going to have some of the best practices that we utilize within our practice on that for financial advisor consulting. Also, one of the big initiatives of this book is to really help people mentally prepare, like I said in the beginning, that preamble to making life your impact, not the business the impact. And the more we can help people kind of identify what is it that they're looking for in that rich life, what is the legacy? Are they living it now already? Let's dial into that. And owning the future is taking the steps, the actual tangible steps to get themselves ready. There are great books out there to sell your business that are very, very logical, and they're analytical, and they're FP transitions, and all those guys, they do a phenomenal job of prepping and getting everything organized, right? But what I find is most advisors aren't mentally ready for what they're talking about doing. It's like the young man who wants to get married, but he's really not prepared for what that next step is. And so he's really hesitant once he gets ready to buy the ring to really make that commitment, because there's so much more that goes into evaluating the right relationship. And that's what my book's about. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help step up the mental game.
Perfect. Well, Scott Danner, this has been an amazing conversation. I really appreciate you carving out the time to spend it with us today. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate having the chance to be on your show. I hope it's just the beginning of something great, because I will definitely want to do it again with a little bit of wine.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to talk to someone like you, and your questions are always so great, and you understand the industry. And I'm just so grateful to be a part of what you're building as well.
Well, my pleasure. Wonderful to have you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening to and or watching this episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. It's always fantastic to have you with us. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Scott Danner as much as I enjoyed having the conversation with Scott Danner, because there's just a lot to be inspired by and motivated by, and a lot of actionable stuff that we covered in this episode. So don't be surprised if you find yourself wanting to listen or watch this one again. So lots of fantastic stuff. It's not every day that you get to meet somebody like Scott, who is humble and generous with his time and his knowledge. And as you heard him say, he's willing to chat with anybody who is got questions about how he and his team are building their business. He just kind of believes in an abundance mentality there. So take him up on it if you're thinking about buying another advisor's business and you want to hear how somebody navigated the waters before you. So really, really good stuff. Speaking of that type of mentality, the growth mentality, the openness, the humbleness to embracing new experiences and recognizing that you're probably gonna have to do a little bit of personal work to get there. We are going to be starting a series here on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast with Jeff Hamui of Modern Elder Academy. And you may have read Jeremy Carnell's What's Your Transition IQ? What's Your TQ blog post a month or two ago, which was a direct result of Jeremy's experience going to the Modern Elder Academy in Baja, California. And some of the stuff that they cover is, and you'll hear Jeff talk about, is, look, we're entering a new era here where our adult life is lasting 20, 30 years longer than the adult lives of generations before us. And so as you start to think about that, not only in your personal life, but in your business life, like, what does a transition look like? If you're transitioning out of a business or you're transitioning into a new phase of the business, how do you handle that type of thing? Not only from a logistical, checking the boxes and dotting the I's, crossing the T's type of stuff, but how do you as an individual and manage your own transition and also lead the transitions for the other folks in the business. It's really, really going to be a fascinating series. I'm looking forward to it. I'm super thrilled that Jeremy Carnell suggested we do this series. So make sure you tune into that. And you want to make sure you don't miss that. Make sure you subscribe to the Modern Financial Advisor podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you like to get your podcast jam on. We are everywhere, baby. And if you don't find us somewhere, let me know. We'll get that there, okay? I hope you're having a wonderful day. Please do continue to mask up, keep your distance, and get that shot if it's available to you. I am like double shots already. I'm excited. I think I've got another few days before I'm kind of fully, that the vax is all kicked in, but double Pfizer, baby. I'm all good. I'm going to be seeing some of you people in person before you know it. No longer just on the screen or in your earbuds. We're going to do some sort of live event, I suspect, in which you'll actually be able to see this show, maybe some live episode recordings, okay? Hope you're having a wonderful day. We'll see you next time on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. See ya. Bye.